Hello, Rivka. You're on mute.
Hi. How are you? Boy, you
Good.
look like a wild man coming up out of the ground, like
Thank you.
Zeus or not
Thank
Zeus.
you. Hello,
That's
Rabbi.
cool.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, how are you?
I am good. Rivka, was that the right link for you?
That was perfect. And I
And-
finished it about half an hour ago. Thank
And
you.
remind me, what was I supposed to do about the vaccine thing? Because I lost the train of what I was supposed to do. It's been so long, and I'm so.
I know it's been a while. There was on the last day, you had a list of things that you were making a point about. And
It's kind of like a summary, you mean?
yeah, summary. And I couldn't write it fast enough. So I just
Okay.
asked you to
Let me
send
go.
it.
I'll go back and look. Now that I know what you're talking about, I will try to go back and look for that.
No problem.
For sure.
Let's see. I feel so proud of myself. I have to pat myself on the back.
Tell me about it.
My computer died. That was not a great thing.
No.
But the good thing is I figured out how to get my new one up and going and actually loaded some programs. And here I am.
Nice.
I'm actually Zooming and I watched the video.
Nice. Well, good. Welcome. And we're glad you're here.
Yeah.
And Peter, how are you? How are things over on the East Coast?
Cold, very cold. It was high at 24 today,
Okay.
but no snow and not windy, so it wasn't bad.
I didn't even look. I haven't even looked for weeks in terms of what the temperature was for my son in Rochester.
Oh my goodness.
But
We would say it was probably colder than tits on a bull. You know
yeah,
that.
probably.
Oh.
Probably.
My wife had a high at 12 up in Vermont. So
I.
yeah, she's general contracting our new to be built garage right now.
Okay. Oh, it's not so bad.
Good
It's
for
pretty much
her.
like you. It's 25, 21 degrees, something like that. So it's not so bad.
But I love coming to your classes. You really are a terrific teacher.
Thank you,
Yes.
Peter.
And I take a lot of online Zooms now that I can work around, a learning schedule.
Yeah.
And
Connect in. I'm going to restart the recording as we go. I'm going to start sharing my screen, get everything all set.
Who's in the Levin box? Is it Wayne and Rebecca?
It has been in the past, but I don't know today who's there.
They're incognito today. Oh, we've got an art history thing going on here.
Yeah, well, I decided, so it's been the same picture all the way through on the book of Job, with Job, but today because of Satan, this is actually a picture from 1826, a work from 1826 on Satan and Job. Kind of a Christian formulation of it, but I figured,
what the heck?
What the heck?
What the heck?
So, hello, Hillary. Good to see you. I had the pleasure of speaking both with your husband and with you today. Now it's great. I get both of you today.
Hello.
All right.
I'm glad it's still a pleasure.
It is a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
So what's
All right.
Christian about this picture?
First of all, the wings. The wings here are very Christian, and just I happen to know the artist was Christian in terms of how he's thinking about Satan and just in general. Okay, so today, welcome everyone. Today, our topic for today is going to be the Jewish view of Satan. We can have a little bit of a conversation at the end about how it compares to Christianity, but really and truly, I want to look at first some biblical texts and get an understanding of sort of what is Satan, Hasatan, that word in the Bible, and then we're going to look at some rabbinic texts as well. So it'll be a text-based conversation, but hopefully by the end of this, we're going to be able to understand a little bit more about how, as Jews, we view Satan. Satan in the Bible, before we actually get into the texts themselves, what do we know? Aside from the book of Job, it really doesn't appear often. It's not rare, but it's not an often used term or an often used word. So it's enough that we can really sort of look at a couple of different places and really get an idea of what it is that we're talking about. And what are these places? We see it in the story of Bil'am, which we're going to look at a little bit today and talk about. We see it in the book of Zechariah. There are a few miscellaneous places that show Satan as an adversary, sometimes even as a human adversary, right? Not anywhere in the divine realm, just human adversary is used, that word is used. And we sometimes see it as a verb form, right? Lesitno, right? To Satan him is almost what it means, and it means to stand against in that particular category. So before we look at the verses that have Satan in it in the story of Bil'am, what is the story of Bil'am? Balak and Bilam, anybody know? Elisheva, please.
Oh.
Sorry.
Well,
Elisheva.
it's about a curse that was supposed to fall on the people of Israel, and the prophet that was sent. I am always confused with the names, Balak and Bilam, who is who. But
Balak is the king, Bilam is the prophet.
So Bilam was sent to curse the people of Israel, and instead of cursing them, he blessed them because he saw the tents and the whole people, and it looked so nice to him. So instead of cursing them, he said, "Ma tovu alecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Israel." How wonderful are your tents, O Israel.
Yes. And you're 100% right, Elisheva, but you left out the best part.
The donkey.
The donkey, right? And the reason I'm saying it's the best part, first of all, it's a great story about a talking donkey, right? And anytime you get a talking donkey, gotta be a good story. But that's where Satan comes in at that point, right? Is that Bilam is riding on the donkey to go and to curse Israel, and an angel of God, right, stands in front of Bilam and with a sword, and the donkey stops because the donkey sees the angel with the sword. Donkey's not going to go, but Bilam doesn't see it, and ultimately winds up beating the donkey, and until the donkey finally turns around and speaks to Bilam and says, "Haven't I always been a good donkey? Why are you beating me like this?" Basically, that's the paraphrase. Okay, so it's in that part of the story that we now are looking, and there's two verses in particular. And what I tried to do, just to make it easy for you, is I highlighted the words Satan in the Hebrew and the English in the red, right, or the burgundy, so you can see it as we go through. So Numbers 22:22, God was incensed at his going. So God is angry that Bilam is still going and trying to curse the Israelites. And so an angel of the Lord placed himself in his way as an adversary. L'satan lo, to be an adversary for him. He was riding a she-ass with his two servants alongside. And then a little bit later on, the angel of the Lord said to him, "Why have you beaten your ass these 3 times? It is I who came out as an adversary, l'satan, to be an adversary, for this errand is obnoxious to me," right? This is a bad errand. And, it's interesting. I brought it over and it said obnoxious, and I'm like, why do they translate it as obnoxious? It's a strange word. But then I looked in the JPS Tanakh, And that's actually how they translated it also. So I kept obnoxious as the root and as the word here. So we have this word, right? It's an angel who's acting in a role, right? And it says very clearly malach, and is acting in this role, but the role is to be an adversary. Now, this is one of the places that Christianity picks up on Satan being a fallen angel, because what they say here is, well, here it says, it's an angel and he's Satan, right? And they put those two together. But the Hebrew doesn't actually say that, right? Lis Satan, to be an adversary, to be a Satan, right? That's what it says here. Questions on this? All right. So the next text we're going to look at is in Zechariah. He further showed me Joshua the high priest. This is different than the Joshua that is in the Bible. There is a high priest in this that is named Yoshua, that is named Joshua, standing before the angel of the Lord, and the accuser standing at his right to accuse him. Now, why did I change the translation? Because here the Hebrew is ha-satan. That is the definite article, the Satan, as opposed to just Satan with an indefinite article. And there's a difference here, right? The ha-satan, and the accuser stood before him, lisitno, to accuse him. It takes the word Satan and turns it into a verb, right? Satan stood before him to Satan him, is literally what it says in the Hebrew. And then again, Vayomer Adonai el ha-satan, God said to the accuser, definite article. So the first is sort of a general category. This is now, there's clearly an individual being who is ha-satan. And what did God say to the accuser? The Lord rebuke you, O accuser. I'm sorry, the angel of the Lord said this to the accuser. The Lord rebuke you, O accuser. May the Lord who has chosen Jerusalem rebuke you, for this is a brand plucked from the fire. And this is going to be important later on as we try to understand the role of Satan vis-a-vis God, right? Here, clearly, God has the power to rebuke, to control, to do something to Satan. That's what the angel is asking here. And then we have from Divrei Hayamim. It's a section of the Tanakh that we don't study often. It's Chronicles, and it's Vayamod Satan al Yisrael. Satan. Again, this is the indefinite article, not ha-satan, just Satan. But here it's being used as a name. That's why I kept it as a name. Satan arose against Israel and indicted David to number Israel. And there's this whole story in Chronicles that David starts to count all the people, and it leads him into sin, and it leads him to a bad place. That's where the story is coming from. So we have Satan as a general category. We have ha-satan as a figure. And in this case, we sort of have Satan as a name.
So Rabbi, in Hebrew, what's the difference between Satan in the first instance and Satan here? Why is it a name here? Is it just because of where it's, how it's poised in the sentence, that it must be a name?
So here, the ha, hold on, let me get my pointer here. So the hey here, right, here's Satan, that's the same down here.
Right.
The hey is in Hebrew the definite article indicator, right?
Yeah.
So this means the Satan. So it's not a name when it's the Satan.
Okay.
Right? Versus here, and this is really usage, Vayamod Satan. It's not a Satan. It's being used here contextually as a name.
Okay, in the previous page you showed us, though, I think it was just Satan, right?
It's Lis Satan.
Lis Satan.
Yeah,
Okay.
the Lamed changes it. Listen.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a quick
Okay.
question. Sorry,
Please.
I should have done that. Okay.
That's okay.
Um,
Go ahead.
So I don't really know, this is Divrei Hayamim, right? Chronicles?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with this. Did David know that there was like, that this was going to be sort of an adversarial situation? Or like, who did he think this Satan was? In
No,
other
this-
words,
this-
when they
this
meet
Satan-
people,
Yeah, this Satan is actually there to sort of trip David up.
so it's sort of like a foil,
Yeah.
kind of in a, okay,
Yeah.
got it. All right. I was trying to get the context of where he sort of blew in from.
Yeah, and Chronicles is to some degree kind of like a retelling, a rehashing of history, in its own sort of new version.
Mhm.
But
Okay.
it does
Yeah.
seem that over time, that the meaning kind of has changed from a general accuser or just kind of an adverb to a noun, to a Satan. I guess you'll talk about that a little bit later, but is that how, was there an evolution of it from, kind of the description of being an accuser to an actual individual?
So there is an evolution, but what I don't know is if it's a linear evolution, right? It's not just one to the next going through history. It's kind of a back and forth, and the rabbis and different people pick up on it depending on the context of what it is that they want to do. So here we have Psalms. This is very poetic, and Psalms is going to use it in a different sort of way. They repay me with evil for good, with hatred for my love. This is God speaking. Appoint a wicked man over him. May an accuser stand at his right side. May he be tried and convicted. May he be judged and found guilty. And I brought this because this idea of Satan as a prosecutor is going to become an important concept within Judaism. And here we have it in Psalms. This is a trial. And Satan is the one that is going to be the accused, not the judge, but the prosecuting attorney. Nancy.
Yeah, this is the second time that we're seeing the accuser or the adversary standing at his right side. What is the meaning of the right side?
So the right side is always the place for your most your most honored servant. It is a place of service to be standing at the right side. So the person on the left is actually the person that in Judaism is the master. The person on his right is the servant. So standing on the right side shows a subservience, right? Not the domination. Bob.
In this Psalms 109, it appears as though the accuser, Hasatan, is actually doing something perhaps noble, appropriate.
Necessary.
Yes.
Necessary.
So as opposed to an Eddie Howe type character.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
appropriate here.
And in Christianity, they haven't quite figured out what role Satan plays, whether Satan is necessary or whether Satan is a necessary evil, forgive the pun, right? Or just evil, right? And unnecessary. They go back and forth depending on the denomination. But from a Jewish perspective, this is necessary. And we lost sight of that a little bit with Job, just because of the way I think Satan was framed in this kind of barroom bet between Satan and God. But the rabbis pick up, and we saw some of that, the rabbis pick up on Satan in Job saying, wait a second, God is losing sight of something here, and we need to make sure that that the God sees and God knows the reality of what's going on here. Okay, One more that we are bringing from the Bible. This is from the book of First Kings. And I just wanted you to see that sometimes it's a human being. So the Lord raised up a Satan, an adversary against Solomon, the Edomite Hadad, who was in the royal family of Edom. So this Edomite Hadad was Satan for Solomon, right? This is very clearly an adversary. This is not divine. This is not anything like that. This is just a human being, and using the word here as adversary in a common, mundane sort of way. Diana.
I think you answered my question. I was going to ask if it's sort of analogous to the Malachim, to the angels showing up as real people, like, for example, in Avram's tent, and they showed up as legit people. Like, I don't know that he thought otherwise. So I didn't know if that was sort of analogous, that Satan comes up in different forms. The same way I think angels come up in different forms as well. It's not there's no like generic one size fits all kind of thing like that.
To some degree, it's a literary foil, right? As you were mentioning before, it's a way to push a story forward, right? In terms of how we're telling it as well. Okay, so that's Satan in the Bible. Now the question is, what do the rabbis do with that? Because we as Jews are a rabbinic religion. We don't just take the Bible. We have to look at this through the rabbis. So we're going to look at a number of different versions, a number of different places where we see rabbinic input. The first I'm going to bring you is from the Babylonian Talmud, Masechet Kiddushin, 81a. The sage Pelemu had the habit to say every day, an arrow in the eye of Satan, mocking the temptations of the evil inclination. One day, it was the eve of Yom Kippur, and Satan appeared to him as a pauper who came and called him to the door requesting alms. Pelemu brought out bread to him. Satan said to him, on a day like today, everyone's eating inside. Shall I stand outside and eat? I sort of hear this fiddler on the roof. You had a bad year. Why should I suffer? Right? Pelemu brought him inside and gave him bread. And he said to him, on a day like today, everyone's sitting at the table. Shall I sit by myself? And they brought him and sat him at a table. And he was sitting and had covered himself with boils and pus. And he was doing repulsive things at the table. This is Satan, right? And Pelemu said to the pauper, sit properly and do not act in a revolting manner. Satan then said to him, give me a cup. They gave him a cup. And he coughed up his phlegm and he spat into the cup. So they berated him for acting this way, at which point in time, Satan pretended to sink down and die. They heard people around them saying, Pelemu killed a man, Pelemu killed a man. So Pelemu fled and hid himself in the bathroom. And Satan followed him to the bathroom and fell down dead before him there. Upon seeing that Pelemu was suffering, he then revealed himself. And Satan said to him, what is the reason that you spoke this way, provoking me, saying, an arrow in the eye of Satan? He replied, but what then should I say? Pelemu said, but what then should I say? Satan said to him, let the master, Pelemu, say, let the merciful one rebuke Satan. So there's a lot in this. It's a very, very rich source. So going back to the first thing, we've got this idea of, first of all, Satan is very able to interact with humanity, with human beings. And Satan is able to, kind of like Elijah, pretend that he's a human and not let the human being know that this is Satan. Because that's how all of this starts. And Satan here is pushing him and pushing him and pushing him, because in a way, Satan is trying to correct him. He said something that was mocking and was presumptuous. And Satan is saying, okay, look, I'm going to come and I'm going to deal with this. And that's how it ends. It ends with Satan saying, who are you to say this to me? I'm doing my job. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And then when Pelemu says, what should I say? Satan's response is, let God rebuke me. In other words, if God has a problem with what I'm doing, God should rebuke me. You have no right to. Because I'm doing my job. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Very rich, very powerful source. Comments on this before we go on to the next one.
Yeah, Rabbi.
Go ahead.
So to me, this seems like as close as I've seen in Judaism come to the Christian Satan, right? The version of a being that comes in. He has pus coming from him. He's disgusting. He's, kind of evil. He's not doing horrible things to the people, but he did. He fell down, died in front of him, or made like he died, so that Pelemu would people would say about him, oh, look what he did to this man or to this person. He killed him. He was evil. So he had a lot of the attributes of the Christian Satan in my mind. I mean, this is very close.
Well, but we see these attributes in Job. I mean, it was Satan that did all these things to Job.
Yes.
Right?
And I think, right.
It's not just
that's why I was asking about the evolution of the term. It does seem in the Bible early on, it was just an adversary. It was an angel maybe that was sent by God to do things that God had put the angel, put in the angel up to do. But now it seems like this is an independent being, right? That can come around, and maybe God is still his, he's still his master, right? His God, and
it's not yes. So it's not Satan's not completely independent, but has
right.
a certain degree of autonomy.
Yes, yeah, that's a better
Right?
way to put it. Right,
It has
yeah.
a certain degree of autonomy. So yes, we're starting to see that, but again, we see this in the Bible too. In Job, that's the Satan we know from Job, right?
Right, but that's later on. Job was written later on, right?
But the rabbis have to pick that up. Job is a biblical book, so the rabbis have to deal with that aspect of it as well. Michael, Frank, and then Diana.
Well, this is a terrific story. If these are the rabbis who are writing a story to make a point, and if that you had just come out and said something simple like Satan took Pelemu aside and explained to him that he shouldn't be talking that way, it would have nothing like the impact on me and then anyone else reading this story on how to interpret who Satan is and how to behave properly,
right?
Despite that.
Right. The rabbis, among other things, are great storytellers.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Diana.
So I think I'm going all the way back to the beginning, literally Bereshit. And I think we're always finding these sort of tests that happen just from the very beginning. Like the serpent was almost sort of like, hey, let's go taste that fruit, kind of has a little bit of a similar trope going on. And then we see it throughout other stories, other tests with our forefathers, whether, I don't need to go, review all that stuff. People can come to services and hear that, but just from the basic, from just going from Bereshit on. And I think really it's just illustrating that there's always going to be that Yetzer Hara. There's always going to be that evil inclination around us. And this is just really illustrating kind of beautifully how do we confront them? I mean, is it like an arrow in their eye? Do we like mock them away? Do we appease them and hope that they'll go away? Like, how do we destroy that? And to me, that's really what this is. Largely speaking to. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, that's a good analysis. I like that. All right, well, let's look on, because the rabbis aren't done yet. From Sanhedrin, we have a very classic source about Satan, okay? And the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham prepared a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. This is from Genesis. And Satan said before the Holy One, blessed be God. Again, we've got this conversation now. It's very Job-esque, right? Satan and God. Master of the universe, this old man, you favored him with the product of the womb, i.e. a child at 100 years of age. From the entire feast that he prepared, did he not have even one dove or one pigeon to sacrifice before you as a thanksgiving offering? Right? So again, Satan is challenging here. This Abraham, who you think is so great, like, okay, he's got this whole bit. You gave him the biggest gift in the world. He's got a kid at 100 years of age, right? And what did he say? How did he say thank you? No gratitude. No gratitude to Rodney Dangerfield. And no respect. And God said to Satan, did Abraham prepare the feast for any reason but for his son? Right? The reason he's doing this is because he's showing gratitude for his son. God continues, if I say to him, sacrifice your son before me, he would immediately slaughter him. And immediately after these manners, the verse states, and God tried Abraham with the sacrifice of Isaac. So it's putting context on this. And what's interesting is for those, and we've talked about this a little bit on the High Holy Days, what are the words right before, and God tried Abraham in that verse? And it was after these things that God tested Abraham. And the rabbis always ask the question, after what things? Here is a midrash in the Talmud that explains what things. And again, the role of Satan is to say, is this person really so good? Right? That is the prosecutor's role. And it doesn't matter, right? If the prosecuting attorney thinks that the person is a good person and maybe innocent, they still have to do their job. They still have to do their job. Okay. This is from the Babylonian Talmud in Masechet Shabbat. And Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, what is the meaning of that which is written? And the people saw that Moses delayed, Boshesh, to come down from the mountain. This is the story of Mount Sinai, and we're going to come to the golden calf, right? That's where we're coming to. Why did the people build the golden calf? Because he delayed. He was Boshesh. He came down, delayed from coming down the mountain. Do not read the word in the verse as Boshesh, but rather Ba'ushesh. In other words, 6 hours have arrived. When Moses ascended on high, he told the Jewish people that in 40 days, at the beginning of 6 hours, I will come down. And I just saw Diana's text to everyone. Yes, this is this week's Torah portion as we read. So in 40 days, at the beginning of 6 hours, I will come. So after 40 days, Satan came down and brought confusion to the world by means of a storm, and it was impossible for them to ascertain the time. So he's messing with things a little bit here, right? It's not just what did you do, but he's actually now starting to take a hand in messing with things. Satan said to the Jews, where is your teacher Moses? They said to him, he ascended on high. He said to them, 6 hours have arrived, and he has not yet come. Surely he won't. And they paid him no attention. Satan said to them, Moses died, and they paid him no attention. Ultimately, he showed them an image of his deathbed and an image of Moses' corpse in a cloud. And this is what the Jewish people said to Aaron, for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we know not what has become of him. So now we start to see, and the reason I brought this is Satan is not just playing the accuser game, he's actually falsifying evidence. He's creating a situation. He's now becoming a little bit more of a trickster. And we don't really see this until after we see this in Christianity. And there's absolutely, I believe, a correlation between what's going on in Christianity and the way that the rabbis are now dealing with Judaism. Rivka, you're clapping, but I see your hands go up.
Oh, I wonder if it's not so much that he was a trickster, but maybe he was giving life to what was in their imaginations or in their minds already.
I like
That-
that a lot. It's a great midrash, right? It's not the simple meaning of what it says here,
Right,
but it's a
right.
great way of explaining it. Yes, that's what they were thinking, and they weren't saying it, and he's showing them what they were already seeing.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. This is from Baba Batra. It was taught in a Baraita with regard to the methods of Satan. So now we're talking about how Satan works. He descends to the world and misleads a person into sinning. So again, we have this trickster aspect. Then he ascends to heaven, levels accusation against that very sinner, and inflames God's anger against him. He then receives permission to act. So here, this to me, Mike Derschlag, is as close as we get to sort of the Christian version of what's going on, minus the independence issue. But Satan is coming down, misleading, tricking us into sinning, then going back to God and saying, these guys are sinners, punish them. And we see that within our text as well. Diana.
Wow, like I just was thinking about what was it? It was the case where that lady like drowned all of her kids, and it was like, well, Satan made me do it. Satan came down and made me do it. And then, you use all these. This is like so relevant today. And then, maybe it changes your prison sentence because it's like they determine you've got like the crazy thing instead. It's really, really interesting how we see this. People still think that. How interesting. Okay.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Because it's a lot easier to blame Satan than to take responsibility yourself.
Absolutely.
Something like that. Mike. Frank. I'm sorry, Michael Frank.
This is bothersome and confusing because here are two things.
That's why I brought it.
So now I'm going to ask you to explain a little bit more because here, not only is Satan not being governed by God. In other words, it doesn't appear, this is almost put Satan in equal terms with God, but God seems to not know what Satan's doing.
So here's where I will disagree with you.
Good.
That's the difference. Unlike Christianity, where Satan doesn't need permission to act, here Satan needs permission to act. Now he's manipulating, right? He's manipulating, but he still is not independent.
Well, all right. Did he receive permission to intentionally mislead and then complain to God? Is God pretending not to know what he did? God's angry.
Yeah, that Michael, I think is the real crux of the question. And I don't know the answer to that because this particular source doesn't say it. I will also say I brought this source specifically because I know it's bothersome and I know that it's very similar to sort of a Christian view. It's also not a source that's picked up anywhere else, right? So it's a little bit kind of on its own, and it could just be reflecting a source that was something that they heard from Christianity and they kind of Judaized it a little bit and brought it in that way.
Well, okay, so now I'm going to have to struggle with this until I can come to terms with it.
As you should. We should always struggle with our text. Rivka, I saw your hand go up a couple times.
I'm sure it wasn't originally written in English. And so the part that says, and inflames God's anger against him, which him does it refer to? Is it the sinner or is it to the adversary?
No,
and
it's
then the question, pardon me?
The sinner.
Okay, then he receives permission to act, doing what?
Punishing, probably.
Is it to punish or is it to?
Punishing.
Okay. I'm
Okay.
trying.
So yeah, and look, I mean, it should be no surprise to many of you who have studied with me and studied Gemara, especially with me. Like, if you were expecting to get one single view of Satan and out of this class, like that's not the way this works, folks, right? I mean, we know that. We know that Judaism is varied and there's multiple opinions, and we're not afraid to throw all of them into the blender a little bit together and say, here's what we think, right? And kind of and mix and match a little bit as we go. We still haven't gotten to one aspect of it. We mentioned it in the beginning that is going to really become, I think, much more of a part of this. Nancy.
So Satan manipulates and makes something happen and then gets permission. I mean, and then gets approval basically to do what he's already done. I mean,
Well,
he caused somebody to
this
be a
is
sinner,
yeah.
and he goes and tells about it, and then he's given permission to go punish the person who he made become a sinner in the first place.
So the assumption here, which is the troubling assumption, is that God is okay with the first part of the sentence or the first part of the source in the same way that God is okay with the last part of the source. Otherwise, there'd be ramifications for Satan. So God seems to be okay with it. And this is a legitimate technique. You know how prosecuting attorneys can sometimes use techniques to get somebody to admit something and, do that. This is a legitimate technique that Satan can use to test somebody.
But the person's already failed the test. So because
in the beginning, right?
They couldn't resist him.
Misleads them into sinning. That's the first part.
Right.
Then he goes back up and tells God, tattletale, he's a sinner. And then God gives him permission to punish him.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Mike Dershlein.
That seems.
Yeah, I think also there's an aspect here about a person's free will, a person's freedom to, say Satan misleads him. He's not physically pushing him to do it. He misleads him. He tells him something, maybe it's not true, and the person does something wrong. So is the person 100% innocent until that time? I don't know. Maybe not.
It doesn't say. Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe he just needed that little push, like sometimes people need to do something wrong. They just need that little, So, yeah.
Diana.
So I don't know like the exact chronology of how all of this works, because to me that the Gemara is just like this, it's still like this huge matrix. I'm still trying to figure out the chronology, but it seems sort of like as we begin going back again to the book of Bereshit, like the whole idea of God changes over time. And, we see God sort of maturing, if you will, like we've talked about in other classes with the people. And I'm wondering if over time, this whole idea of Satan or Satan and Satan's roles sort of are also changing. Like first we have it that he's just like kind of acting on his own, it's like, all right, eat this, whatever. Oh, and then all of a sudden now we see this like communication with God. It's like a whole different level of contact that we hadn't quite seen before.
It's hard to do the chronology. The one thing that challenges that assertion of a chronology or of a development is the fact that because this is a Baraita, it means it's actually an early source. So the other sources that we were looking at are actually later sources in the Gemara than this one. And so I don't know what that means for the chronology, but I'm sure there are doctoral dissertations about Satan in Judaism. I did not want to read any of them for this class, so I didn't. But I'm sure that people have sort of asked these types of questions in terms of the development of the idea of Hasatan within Judaism. I'm sure that it's out there.
Well, it's really confusing because what's also confusing is the whole idea that I just read after the little ellipsis there with to act, and it says, and takes away the sinner's soul as punishment.
Yeah,
So,
I didn't
like,
really want to get into
yeah.
that. That's why I took it
Yeah,
out.
that's what I figured. But of course, like I couldn't help it. Like I was like, I got it, it was too much of a cliffhanger for me. So
Yeah, I know.
it's kind of interesting that like here, Satan is also the one who's leveling the punishment. It's like he's doing
Yes.
God's bidding. And that's what was, to me, was the Chiddush. That was what was novel in this little vignette, is that Satan actually has the power of
Right.
the
And by the
punishment
way,
here.
that last little piece after the ellipsis of taking away his soul is one of the things that kind of indicates to me that there's a Christianity piece to this.
Yeah, it's
A
kind of,
connection with Christianity.
that's why I kind
So-
of was not sure where that was going. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Elisha,
Rabbi, Satan is here provoking people, but in the book of Job, didn't he provoke God? Because
he
Job was not
spurred
doing,
God on. Yes, he spurred God on.
so that's different. That's provoking God is like, it's hard to accept that.
But we saw that in the midrashic source about Abraham too, right? With Satan kind of provoking God, saying, "Hey, is he really so good?" It's the same sort of idea.
Oh,
Satan just kind of provokes everybody.
okay.
An equal opportunity provoker. Rivka.
Just a quick question. Was this, you said you couldn't tell exactly the timeline chronology, but can you give a general idea, the time frame that this might have been written?
So if it is true, and I'm unclear about it, but if it is true that this is actually a Baraita, it means that it comes from the strata of the Mishnah, which means it would have been done around the year 200. It would have been codified by the year 200.
Okay. Thank you.
As opposed to the Gemara, which is 200 to 500.
Right.
That later strata. Okay. So now we start to see a switch over, right, from Satan just as Satan into other things, right? Other things. Mike says one difference with Christianity, Satan descends, whereas in Christianity he might rise. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, Satan is sort of seen as below and coming up, and God is above and coming down in Christianity. And this is Satan is up there with God and then comes down. So, Reish Lakish says that Satan, the evil inclination, and the angel of death are all one. It's all the same thing. The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, Satan, the angel of death, it's all wrapped up into one. He is the Satan who seduces people, then accuses them, as it is written. So Satan went forth in the presence of the Lord and smote Job with vile sores. We saw that. He is also the evil inclination, as it is written, the impulse of the thoughts in his heart were only evil continuously. He is also the angel of death, as it is written, only spare his life in Job. Apparently Job's life depended on Satan. So Reish Lakish says, kind of starts to meld all these ideas together in terms of what Satan is. Okay? There we go. We have two more rabbinic sources that I want to talk about, and then we'll sort of close it up. So this is, again, Talmud. Abaye said, a person should not say that, as Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish said, and it was also taught in the name of Rabbi Yossi, one must never open his mouth to Satan, i.e., one must not leave room or raise the possibility of disaster or evil. In other words, this is kind of the evil eye sort of ideology. Like, don't say anything because you'll bring the evil eye on you. Right? That's kind of the idea behind this. This formula, which states that the entire debt is owed, the entire debt owed is due to his transgressions, has not been collected, raises the possibility that further payment will be exacted. So, bad things may happen. You don't want to raise more possibilities because maybe there's still stuff that you owe, and now the debt collector is going to go, oh yeah, I forgot about you, and come down and come get you. But we sort of see this migration a little bit, or this, in thought of Satan is evil inclination and all of that, evil eye, and we don't want to tempt the evil eye. And finally, it was really interesting. I like wanted to start with this, but then I decided I wanted to end with this. This is Rashi on the story of Bilam that we read in the beginning. And the angel of the Lord stood in the way as an obstruction, as an adversary against him. It was an angel of mercy, Rashi says. An angel of the Lord. And he wished to deter him from sinning so that he would not sin and perish. This flips everything. Rashi's flipping everything on its head, right? This is not evil this is actually God being an obstruction, being an adversary so that he won't sin. And I found it just so fascinating to see that Rashi, who's now living much later in the Middle Ages, very aware of Christianity and all of that. And by the way, I think that's why he's doing this, because Rashi does not want to go down the road of Satan being this evil figure and whatever, because he wants to have a polemic against Christianity. We don't do that, right? This Satan, this adversary, is actually an angel of mercy. He's doing something. He's trying to save Bilam by standing in his way. And it's just so interesting to see the way that the rabbis struggle with this and turn it on its head. Michael Frank and then Bob Stein.
If I recall correctly, and please help me out here, Reish Lakish started out as a really bad guy, a thief, and is that correct?
You are correct.
Okay, so it's interesting that those are the words he used
Before.
that it's all together. So my thought is, Reish, and comparing this with the next one, the one before this, Rashi, comparing this with Abaya, I'm observing that Reish Lakish would know more than Abaya about how to deal with satanic inclinations, and he is one of the great sage repentance, because he completely changed.
Right.
So Reish Lakish's response to Abaya would be, never mind the superstitious stuff, just do your repentance properly and you'll be, you'll overcome that.
Interesting. I like that. Bob.
I'd like you to elaborate a little bit more about the differences between Christian Satan and Jewish Satan. I know that in Christianity, God elevates an angel, Michael, and he becomes one of the archangels, and Michael comes down and slays Satan. And there's a lot of Christian iconography that shows Michael with a giant sword in his hand, with one foot on Satan after he's killed him. And it just seems that there's nuances here in Judaism, more of an adversary, more of a, more of, I don't know if foil is the right word, but I wonder, I'd like you to try to elaborate on that a little bit more.
So yes, I will. Let's get to the summary, and then we can kind of try to compare a little bit with what you're saying. And I will say, obviously, that my area of expertise is not Christianity, but I can certainly bring some thoughts on that. Okay, so in terms of the summary, what we've seen so far is in the Bible, Satan is seen both as a human adversary as well as sort of an angelic figure. And I'm using the word angelic in quotes because it doesn't say he's actually an angel, but he's a divine character, right? So that's why I use it in quotes. We see that Satan's job is to prosecute and to challenge in the Bible pretty consistently. We actually even see it as a verb, to be an adversary there. For the rabbis, we see that Satan can take on a little bit more of a tricky aspect, getting us to stumble into sin. We see that sometimes Satan is seen as the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, and it's something that the rabbis speak a great deal about as Yetzer Hara. So if we're connecting these two together, that's a very powerful connection that carries through a lot of rabbinic thought and rabbinic Judaism. And certainly we've seen at the end of all of this that it's something from the rabbi's perspective we shouldn't be tempting, right? We shouldn't be putting ourselves out and tempting Satan to come in and to be there. Now, the difference between Judaism and Christianity is really in terms of two things. One, in terms of autonomy versus independence, right? In Christianity, not entirely, but a lot of the denominations see almost a dualistic sort of paradigm, right? God represents good, Satan represents evil. Now, ultimately, God is more powerful because you have to have that hierarchy there. It's not equal. It's not like Zoroastrianism that has the duality between light and dark of two equal deities, right? So there is a hierarchy. But in Christianity, Satan represents evil and Satan represents only evil. What we are seeing Satan do in Judaism isn't evil. It may be a little manipulative and it may be a little tricky, but it's not evil. It's trying to see who we truly are and the decisions that we're going to make ultimately. Right? Are we going to, because we have free will, we're going to have to make choices. And so what are the choices that we're going to make? And then to ultimately hold us accountable for those choices. In Christianity, good and evil is in a cosmic battle that ultimately comes to its head at the end of times, Revelation and all of that. And that's the ultimate and final battle between good and evil, these two opposing forces. And one of the things that we're going to see, hold on, do I have one more? Oh, yeah, I have a little bit more on the summary. I'm missing something here. We're going to see that in Judaism that comes across very, very differently, right? We see that Satan cannot ultimately force a person into evil, only allow for the opportunity to sin, maybe deceitfully, maybe with some I don't know, pulling the wool over their eyes, something like that, but can't force you into sin. It's still 100% your choice. And Satan is entirely under the auspices of the divine. And we see that very, very clearly in a verse from Yeshayahu, right? This is God saying, I form light and create darkness. I make shalom and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. Now, from a theological point of view, it's easier to have the dualism, because then we can say God is always good, and I can always say God's in my corner, and all of this, right? By the way, the Yotzer Or Uvarei Choshech Oseh Shalom Uvarei Et HaKol is part of our liturgy. They actually change it. Instead of saying I create evil, they change it to and creates everything, because they don't want to say I create evil. But that's where this is the biblical source where that comes from. But in Judaism, God is everything, and Satan doesn't do anything without God's approval. Which then, when we come back to Job, is going to cause us to ask the hard questions. Why did God approve this? Why does God let this happen, right? And what theological sense are we supposed to make from all of this? And that's going to be really our conclusion and discussion next week of, all right, what do we do with all this now? How do we understand Job? What is the message, the lesson that Job is trying to teach us, either back then or in the modern world as well. Any questions or comments or things? I mean, I don't want to jump to the end result. That's going to be for next week, but on what we discussed today on Satan specifically. Go ahead, Diana.
I'm trying to think how to articulate this. So, it's interesting. You were talking about the difference between Judaism and Christianity vis-a-vis Satan and God. And I'm thinking of it sort of like, maybe you can correct me. Well, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a lot more like, one's more like disjunctive and one's conjunctive. So like in Christianity, it's either good or bad. Whereas in Judaism, it's like, there's this union of like, it's good and bad. It's all happening at the same time. And it's much more fused together and incorporated into one sort of unit than this and that. But to my own point a little bit, I do see in like more, less progressive streams of Judaism, it almost harkens to that, because like I went to this very religious yeshiva growing up, and everything was either a Chilul Hashem or a Kiddush Hashem. And
Explain what that means for everybody.
What's that?
Explain what that means for everybody.
It was either like for the good of God or for the bad of God. And now that I'm sort of hearing it from this perspective, like half a century later, it's really very gratifying and heartening that these things are happening together. And it's not so easy as it's a Kiddush Hashem or a Chilul Hashem. And we walked around in this state of fear for like the whole time I was there. And It was like, wow, there goes my childhood.
So look, you said a couple of things that I think that are very important. First of all, I absolutely 100% agree that what we're talking about here is a spectrum, not poles, right? In Christianity, it's poles. And what we're talking about is a spectrum of between, good choices and bad choices, and evil inclination and good inclination. And Judaism always works within that spectrum. So that very much I agree with. The other thing you said is, that as a kid, because of that polarity, it was all about fear. And by the way, Satan in Christianity is all about fear, right? That's Satan's purpose, is to create such a state that you would not want to take a chance of going to hell and doing that, and therefore you're going to go to the side that you're supposed to.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was even like keeping your feet together, like during davening, like you couldn't have like your feet 1 inch apart, because that wasn't a Kiddush Hashem. I mean, it just went on and on. It was unbelievable. Absolutely. And the school, because you worked near there.
Yes, I do. Okay, I think Mike, let me just double check. Actually, Nancy was first and then Michael.
Okay, so you used the analogy of the prosecutor, and I'm seeing this as a little bit differently, more like the tester or quality control. And, there's nothing wrong with quality control. Like, things happen. And like you said, there's a whole spectrum. There's some things are better and some things are worse, and all. But the quality control tester person is trying to see that under those circumstances that the result is good, or if there's an evil, that it's detected and it's dealt with, and that sort of thing.
I like that. Satan, quality control manager. I like that. That's good. That's good. That's a really interesting way of looking at it, Nancy. I like that. Michael.
One of the things that I remember reading with Martin Buber was that he believed, and I'm paraphrasing, that the essential problem of being Jewish is that good and evil flow from one God.
Yeah.
And that is not reconcilable in finite time.
Agreed. Especially when you combine that with the realities of sort of what we see in the world around us.
Yeah.
It is the challenge of being Jewish. Absolutely. It is the challenge of being Jewish. But it goes back to what I talk about so often. Being Jewish is about living life in a balance, right? Not in an extreme, not in at the poles. And this to me is if God contains everything, then there's a balance there, right? And it also means that there's a purpose to evil in the world. And it's hard for us to understand that. And we're going to talk maybe a little bit more about this next week. We talk about failure as the great teacher. Bad choices are a teacher. And sometimes bad choices lead to really bad choices, which lead to evil, but it's a teacher, right?
I've never been a strong supporter of relying on failure to learn something. I imagine and I know you can learn something, but you actually learn far more. If the world is divided between success and failure, you learn far more about success by succeeding, because you learn how to live a good life or a moral life or a successful life.
You learn more things. I would agree with you. You learn more things, but you learn more about yourself. I mean, first of all, the fact that you can fail is something that every human being must learn.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Blessing of a B-. Yeah, Diana. It's a great book, actually. But we learn a lot from our failures. I agree. We learn, yes, I think, holistically, we learn more things from what we succeed at than we do, but we may learn more important things sometimes from failure.
No argument.
As we go. All right, my friends, it's a little bit late. Thank you. I hope we were able to pique your curiosity and your interest a little bit about Satan. And somehow we're going to try to have a little bit more of a discussion next week, and bring all this together and figure out what do we make of all this. Wayne and Rebecca, welcome.
Ah,
Oh, you were eating. Gotcha.
Did the class start yet?
Wayne, the test is going to be in about 5 minutes. Go to your Canvas, open up module 5.
Just kidding. We've been here the whole hour.
Yeah. And what I may do, we'll see how many people show up next week. For some, I may put some questions at the beginning of the class and break us up into a little bit smaller groups so we can talk to one another, and sort of share some ideas before we come back, just because I want this to be a little bit more of a conversation as opposed to sort of the frontal that we've been doing up until this point in time. Nancy.
I just want to make some comment about how much you learn from success versus failure.
Okay.
Failure, the lessons you learn from failure are instilled much more deeply within yourself, in your emotional quotient or whatever. And success is kind of like, it's good and it's just sort of, it's there, and it doesn't really hit you hard. But the kinds of things that you learn from failure are pretty deep and can change you. They can change you. They have to change you. Actually, that's their purpose, right?
Yeah. Nice, Nancy. Nice. All right, folks. I will see you guys all next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 you,
Thank
Rabbi.
you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye,
I'll see you on
Thank
Friday.
you.
I'll see you on Friday.
Yes.
Yeah, me too.
Cool.
Good.